And now we're back with Arts and Crafts with Atticus. Slow down, slow down. Okay. Today on the next installment of Arts and Crafts with Atticus, we've already built one of these guys, but now we're gonna build the other brother. So I think we're gonna start here with the same pattern as we did last time. Trying to be extra careful this time so that I do not rip anything. We have our head out, and this is fairly straightforward. Okay, so we have our head, we have our bill. Definitely more of a Luigi fan myself. Always have been. I don't know why. Even when my fiance and I tried to play Mario, pretty sure we tried to play a bunch of different Marios. She is not fond of video games whatsoever. She thinks they're boring and they're a waste of time. So you can imagine how she feels about me making videos about video games. I ripped his pants! I ripped his pants, guys. I'm terrible. I'm a horrible human being. Arm number 1 down. One more to go. Got the second arm on there. It looks retarded because it's not, he doesn't have his head yet. Bam! Your boy, Mario, stunting, looking sick, looking sweet. Your boys, your boys. One day we'll make them fight. Oh, it's interesting because Luigi is legit taller than Mario. It's a nice little detail, Nintendo. Well, that's gonna be it for today's Arts and Crafts with Atticus. Thank you guys so much for hanging out. And make sure you stick around to hear a word from our sponsor. What is going on, guys? So today we are back, and today we're actually gonna be diving deeper into the Jungle Cup. And actually, if this video comes out when I have it planned to come out, this should be Wednesday. So that means tomorrow is Thursday, which means we should be getting the Mirror Cup announcement. I'm super excited for that. I've not been doing too much speculation. Is if you stuck around to hear a couple of thoughts at the end of yesterday's video, I have a prediction, and it's basically just one of the more unique things that I've seen online that I could possibly see it working out. If it is called the Mirror Cup, I think it could possibly be fire, ice, and ground. The reason is because fire and ground, or sand, make glass, and ice is also kind of like a mirror. I don't know, it's a cool theme. I think if that's the way it goes, that would be really cool. If not, whatever they decide to do. Of course, as soon as it's announced, we'll do an announcement video and we'll immediately start jumping into our Pokemon there. So get your fingers ready for some votes. That's going to be very interesting. So today, we're actually going to be looking at Raichu, a pure electric type Pokemon, maxing out at 2182. Which is actually pretty decent for the Great League. That means if we have a 0 in attack, 15 defense, 14 stamina at level 26, we can hit that 1499, which does give us our greatest stat product while still staying inside the Great League here. Now, according to my spreadsheet and all the numbers that I have ran, we do actually end up with 82nd in bulk and 61st in stat product, which, okay, that's not horrible. That's not too bad, actually. And of course, all of that does come from our base stats here with a 193 on attack, 151 defense, and a 155 on stamina. Looking pretty good so far. So there's not really much to say about this until you really see this board down here. This thing is chocked full of moves. This is so ridiculous. But I figure, if Raichu has them, we're gonna look through them. So we do have 4 fast moves and 5 charge moves to actually sort through here. And to help us get through the fast moves, I do have a spreadsheet made, which I will show off and of course let you guys look at it as well. But really quickly, let's just go through some of these numbers. Thundershock here for 4.5 energy per turn, we get 1.5 damage per turn. After stab, it's a 1.8. Spark has a 4 energy per turn for 2 damage per turn. After stab, it is 2.4. Volt Switch for 2 energy at a 2.4 damage per turn does go up to 2.88 after stab. And we do have the newly added Charm for 2 energy. We have 5.33 damage. No stab since we do not carry that fairy typing though. So, of course, looking into these moves, I was like, holy cow, 4 different freaking fast moves. How are we going to determine this? But as I usually do, I ended up putting all 4 of these moves up against the entire meta, because those are going to be the more relevant Pokemon that we're going to look at in the cup anyways, and just kind of determined how we do with those moves versus the meta Pokemon. So let's actually take a look at this. So to start us off here, we do have basically all of the meta relevant Pokemon. Now, if you haven't heard, PvPoke did reduce the number of meta relevant Pokemon from 22 down to 17. I talked about that in yesterday's video, but basically we have the newly revised list here. Now, something to keep in mind is all these simulations are ran with a 1v1 shield scenario, 1 shield for Raichu, 1 shield for our opponent. Basically, we have our fast move at the very top. You can see kind of in columns C and D there. Then we do have a battle rating and an HP remaining, just to kind of give an idea of how much health we have left. Then we do have our win percentage down here at the very bottom. As you can see, the Thundershock actually ends up winning 58.82% of the matchups. And then we have a preferred and a worst. So preferred is where the move is actually the highest battle rating across all 4 moves. Worst is actually whenever that battle rating is the lowest out of all of those moves. So for instance, if we look at Beedrill here, you can see that Beedrill with Thundershock, we actually lose up against that Pokemon with a 492 battle rating. You can see Spark actually has a 500, so we would end up tying. So even though we lost with Thundershock, it's not a red color, because I'm not actually too concerned about which moves win or lose in this area. I'm actually just concerned about which moves just perform better. So as you can see, Spark having a higher battle rating definitely performs better than Thundershock there, and you can see Volt Switch is a 289 and Charm is actually a 325. So Volt Switch is actually the worst move to go up against with Beedrill there, where Charm is actually kind of middle of the road, Thundershock is actually middle of the road, and Spark actually gives us our best chance up against Beedrill. So if we actually look through some of these moves here, you can see that Thundershock definitely seems to be a pretty high priority move. A 58.82% win ratio is very, very strong. Spark actually comes in with a 41.18, Volt Switch at a whopping 17.65, and then we do have Charm with 23.53. Now, something that's interesting is PvPoke actually moves Raichu, instead of running Thundershock where it used to be, it now runs Charm, which I thought was kind of interesting, and I've been trying to figure out really what the purpose of running Charm. I guess it makes Raichu a little bit more of a generalist, but when you look at the numbers in this fashion, you can see that Charm only actually wins 23.53% of the matches with a 1v1 shield scenario, whereas Thundershock definitely outperforms it generalistically. So it's not really that it's a generalist move. I mean, I'm fairly unsure why, because I mean, the matchups that we win, looks like we win Lantern, Magneton, Magnezone, Masquerain, Noctowl, and that's it. Whereas on Thundershock, you can see Fortress, Golem, Lantern, Magneton, Magnezone, Masquerain, Noctowl. I mean, there's just so many more wins that we have with Thundershock. So as you can see, we're actually, you know, I kind of wanted to bring that up because I think it's important to be able to see visually which moves do better than others. And as you can see, as long as you don't have Volt Switch, you're pretty much in a decent position. Charm should have some uses. It's definitely gonna make it a little bit more awkward, but even then, I still think that I would go with Spark over Charm if it was me personally. I guess you could say that Charm is going to help because you can, you know, kind of mitigate the whole shielding scenario. If you're able to just output tons of damage from your fast move, you don't really have to worry too much about your charge moves and the opponent shielding them. So there's that, but I definitely think that Spark would be my best option if I didn't have Thundershock, and then definitely Thundershock if I have one. Thundershock is not the worst option in any of these moves, whereas Spark actually is the worst possible option up against Venomoth. Even Volt Switch outperforming it there, which is pretty interesting. As you can see, Volt Switch is the absolute worst, and Charm is kind of like middle of the road. It's got 4 that it's the best in and 4 that it's just kind of the worst in. So, I mean, it's ultimately up to you guys, but for me, I definitely want to go with Thundershock. So now that we've got our fast move out of the way, let's actually move into our charge moves. So, whew, do we have quite a few here. So we do have Brick Break, Thunder Punch, Wild Charge, Skull Bash, and Thunder here. And I still really like the Brick Break Wild Charge combo. I did try running a few simulations with Skull Bash. Unfortunately, in this cup, it's not gonna help us as much as we possibly could do in another cup. Considering this is a normal type move, it's not gonna hit anything for super effective damage. So at best, it's gonna be a neutral type damage towards anything in the cup. And the problem with it is that it's 75 energy. So the thing about Raichu is that it's relatively squishy. So it is going to die kind of quickly because, you know, we don't have too much defense, we don't have too much HP there. So we are going to die kind of fast, and the thing that I like about Raichu is that it's able to get off a lot of these charge moves rather quickly. So things like Brick Break, Thunder Punch, and Wild Charge are really like the bread and butter to Raichu for me personally. Now, if you do like to play the Dangerous Man's game, Skull Bash is going to be just fine for you. You do get that defense debuff on the opponent, which is something. I guess you could use Skull Bash as possibly like a setup, like if you have an idea where you want to lead with Raichu, basically just get Skull Bash off and let Raichu die, you know, sacrifice Raichu to bring out, you know, your next Pokemon. If you know that they're going to lead with something super bulky that, you know, you don't really have a whole lot to go up against with it. I mean, possibly, but let's actually talk about our charge moves here really fast. So Brick Break, 35 energy for 40 damage at a 1.14. Thunder Punch for 40 energy, we get 55 damage at a 1.38. After Stab, though, it does bump up to 66 for a 1.65. Wild Charge here for 50 energy, we get 90 damage at a 1.8. After Stab, it does bump up to 108 for a 2.16. Skull Bash here for 75 energy, we get 130 damage at a 1.73. And Thunder rounding it out here at the bottom for 60 energy, we get 100 damage at a 1.67. After Stab, it does get bumped up to 120 for a clean 2.0. So for me personally, I still feel like Brick Break and Wild Charge are the two moves that we should go with here. Wild Charge is going to be just a little bit faster than Thunder, but quite the more efficient move. And Brick Break is just going to be our fastest move. So we basically need to have a move that lets us kind of help with the speed of Vigoroth and things like that. Otherwise, Wild Charge is definitely going to be the punishing move, the one that you want to throw out to hit massive amounts of damage. I mean, Wild Charge is going to be amazing for that. Skull Bash, I could see it one-hitting quite a few Pokemon in the cup, but the problem, like I said, is it's going to be really slow. And the problem with one-hitting that Pokemon means that you're going to kill it, and it's not even going to worry about the debuff. So I don't know. I'm still not sold on Skull Bash, at least on Raichu. It's just not for me. So with that moveset in mind, Thunder Shock, Brick Break, and Wild Charge, we are going to move into our shields here. Up against the entire cup, we do have a 0 versus 0 situation, which actually ends up with a 43.3%. Not too bad. Our 2 versus 0 actually bumps up to an 84.3, which is alright. Now, if we have complete shield advantage there, I do like to look for the Pokemon that still end up beating us. Quite a few grass types end up beating us here. Basically, we don't have a whole lot to really do even neutral damage to them. Brick Break is kind of our only option there. And Wigglytuff also shows up here, which, okay, that's to be expected at this point. We also do have the 0 versus 2 shield situation, which is a 2.2%. Unfortunately, that is extremely low. We only actually end up beating 3 Pokemon here. Pidgeot, Pidgeotto, and Chatot. Those are the only 3 Pokemon we still end up beating. Now in our 2 versus 2, we actually end up with a 42.5%, which is right around where we were in the 0 versus 0. So we don't statistically lose too many more matchups as an opener, but we definitely do like to close just a tad bit more than we would rather open. So to visualize some of these matchups, we're actually going to go into PvPoke. We're going to build our Raichu with Thunder Shock, Wild Charge, and Brick Break, just like we said before. Give ourselves 1 shield. We're going to do a multi-battle up against the entire Jungle Cup. 1 shield for them as well to give the most evenness. Once we hit battle, you can see our 1v1 actually is a 55.2%. Seems like the squishy type Pokemon actually end up preferring this 1v1 shield scenario. Kind of like we saw yesterday with Yanma. It seems like we're able to survive long enough from the fast move damage to at least shield 1 charge move. And then we can basically just use all of our attack, which, I mean, we're basically all attack anyways. And we're actually able to actually beat the opposing Pokemon. But after we factor in 2 shields, we still end up starting to die off with some of the fast move damage. So 1v1 seems to be a sweet spot for the squishy Pokemon. So kind of interesting. So to start us off here, we're going to go over the bug typing, and as you can see, we do have some pretty good matchups here. Masquerain, Yanma, Ninjask, Vespiquen, Yanmega all showing up there at the very top. If we scroll down to see some of the more risky ones, Beedrill and Parasect actually show up down here. Beedrill is going to be a pretty difficult matchup pretty much in most of these scenarios. Beedrill is pretty freaking good because it doesn't carry that flying typing. It's got that poison typing instead. It actually doesn't take super effective damage from us, and Thundershock doesn't have a really high output anyways as far as damage goes. We're really using it for the energy, so kind of makes it a difficult matchup. Parasect there, pretty freaking awesome that it's got that grass typing as well as the bug typing, which ends up meaning that we actually end up having a lot of resisted damage going towards it. As you can see, Dustox is the one actual tie that we have there, and then Scizor, Pinsir, and Volbeat are actually our three hardest matchups that we could still end up winning. Next, moving on to the electric typing, as you can see here, we do actually end up having 9 losses out of all of these Pokemon. Let's actually talk about a couple of the wins though. You can see we do have Magneton at the top. We do have Lantern in here. We also end up having Magnezone. And then we start to tie around the Electabuzz, Manectric, and Pachirisu there. And then we start to lose. So these 9 losses are quite interesting. From what I can tell, it seems like some Pokemon that just end up having a little bit more bulk than we do, or if they're at least able to push neutral damage to us, then they actually have a really good chance here. So like Plusle and Minun are actually pretty bulky to be, you know, little electric type mice or rats or whatever they are. Luxray actually going to be able to hit us with Hidden Power if I'm not mistaken, and Luxio as well. The Alolan Raichu, it's going to be able to hit us for some neutral damage if it wants to, but with Spark it's actually got some decent resisted damage, but that Grass Knot actually helps it push, like I said, that neutral damage to help it win that matchup. It does show that Raichu actually shows up here. Like I said, PvPoke is preferring Charm on Raichu in a lot of these scenarios. Golem and Graveler there also whipping out some rock type moves to help go up against us to definitely do at least neutral damage while we're only pushing resisted damage. So the electric typing seems like it's kind of a 50-50, well, a little bit more than 50-50 actually. We do win a few more than we do either tie or lose there, but kind of have to pay attention in the electric type matchups just in case. Next we have the grass typing. We only end up having 3 wins here: Cacturne, Snover, and Jumpluff. So, those are pretty rough. We do see that tie with Roserade, and then from there it's basically all downhill. Lombre, Breloom, Lily, Parasect. Let's actually jump all the way to the bottom to see the worst matchups that we have. Weepinbell, Gloom, Torterra, Vileplume, and Roselia all showing up there as our hardest possible matchups. Victory Bell, you can see, Meganium, Bayleaf, Ivysaur, Venusaur. A lot of the more relevant grass types are definitely going to end up beating us here, which is kind of a bummer, but it does make sense. Last but not least, we do have the normal typing, and this one actually isn't too bad for Raichu. You can see we do have quite a few wins up here. Once we get down into our losses though, you can see we do have a couple of ties we need to talk about. Furret and Zangoose, both are going to be ties, which, okay. Then we do have Porygon, Persian, Delcatty, Linoone, Kangaskhan, Vigoroth, and Wigglytuff as our losses. So those are some interesting losses. I definitely think Wigglytuff and Vigoroth are the 2 most prominent there. Kangaskhan, Linoone, and Delcatty, we've all done deep dives on those, and I wouldn't say that those are necessarily bad options, but they're kind of off meta in a lot of ways. So I definitely think that the normal typing, the more relevant or even possibly the slightly off meta ones, are definitely the ones that are going to beat us. But it's important to note that a lot of the normal flying type Pokemon that show up in this list are just going to get obliterated. So now let's actually move a little bit further into the meta relevant Pokemon. Like I said earlier, PvPoke has actually switched from 22 Pokemon down to 17. They removed a few, then they added Wigglytuff basically. We talked a little bit about that yesterday, so I won't bore you again with that. We're going to jump straight into our shields here. In our 0 versus 0, we have a 35.3%, which is okay. It's a little bit worse than what we did up against the entire cup. Alright, then we move into our 1 versus 0, which is where we have 1 shield over our opponent. we actually end up having a 64.7% here. So some notable Pokemon that we end up still losing to, even though we have a shield up on them, are things like Wigglytuff, Vigoroth, and definitely Victory Bell. All of those are going to be able to put a big hurting on us. Once we move into our 0 versus 1 though, we do actually end up with an 11.8%, which is at least double digits, but it's still pretty bad. The Pokemon that we still end up beating though in this scenario are both Noctowl and Vespiquen, which is okay. Both of those are pretty good matchups, and they make a lot of sense once you think that both of them have flying typing. Last but not least, we move into our 1 versus 1, which is a 58.5, which that's what I'm liking to see there. We do actually end up winning a lot more matchups this time rather than we did in our previous segment against the entire cup. So at least above 50% is nice. So let's actually see what those matchups are all about. So back in PvPoke, we do have our Raichu, Thundershock, Wild Charge, Brick Break, just like before. We do have 1 shield for ourselves, 1 shield for our opponent. This time though, we're gonna do a custom group. We're gonna quick fill it with the Jungle Cup meta. As you can see down there at the bottom, once we hit battle, you can see we do have that 58.8. I said 58.5, didn't I? Up against all of these Pokemon, let's actually look at some of the wins we have. We have Noctowl, Masquerain, Vespiquen, Magneton, Venomoth, Fortress, Lantern, Magnezone, Golem, Scizor, and then we lose up against that Beedrill there again. But we lose against the Beedrill, Raichu. Like I said, with Charm, it does really well up against itself, but I still feel like Thundershock is the way to go. Graveler, Venusaur, Vigoroth, Wigglytuff, and Victory Bell being the hardest possible matchup to go up against. So a lot of those make a lot of sense. I mean, I can't argue with a bunch of these. So Noctowl, Masquerain, Vespiquen all carry the flying typing. Magneton, I mean, it's going to be weak to Brick Break, I guess, but other than that, it's not going to be like super weak to anything else we have. And as you can see, it does look like we just beat it down with Brick Break, which, like I said, in the right circumstances, Brick Break does really good. It's not really great outside of that, but where it's needed, it actually does really good. Then you can see Venomoth. Okay, Venomoth is generally pretty bad up against the electric types. Fortress, doing decent here. Lantern with, you know, being weak to electric type damage, that makes a lot of sense. Magnezone here, pretty much going to be the same thing as Magneton. It's going to have that weakness to the Brick Break. Golem also going to have a weakness to Brick Break. And Scizor, we're going to just be doing a lot of neutral damage to that one. Then Beedrill, unfortunately it doesn't carry that flying typing, so we end up having a harder time with that. Raichu up against ourselves, of course. Charm is definitely going to be preferred up against ourselves. So we don't have that 1.5 damage versus 5.33. I mean, then we do have the Graveler though. Interestingly, we beat the Golem, but we lose to the Graveler. I wonder why. It's kind of an interesting thing. I mean, Graveler is going to have a little bit more bulk, but kind of interesting. I wonder if it's truly because Wild Charge just makes it that much worse, because as you can see, Graveler only has Rock Blast and Stone Edge. Let's try, just for the sake of the simulation, let's try to give it Thunderbolt and see how fast it becomes here. Ooh, yeah, Thunderbolt actually makes it lose. So very interesting. Graveler definitely prefers to have both rock type moves in that situation. I personally don't like to run all rock type moves on Graveler. That's just me though. But hey, for what it's worth, it beats Raichu. Then we have Venusaur, which of course we're going to do a ton of resisted damage to. It's not going to do a whole lot for us there. Vigoroth, Wigglytuff, the king and queen, I mean, what are you going to do there? And Victory Bell, same thing with Venusaur. It's just going to take a lot of resisted damage from us. So all in all, I'm actually quite impressed with Raichu. I mean, it's never been horrible in a cup. It's definitely not been like the top meta relevant electric type Pokemon, but it's definitely been a formidable opponent in a lot of cups, and it was quite surprising in a couple of cups. But I think in the Jungle Cup in general, it's kind of hindered because of the grass types, and that's kind of the only thing really holding it back. I mean, the electric types are close to that 50-50 range where we do okay, but we do kind of decent against them. The bug types we do pretty well up against in most scenarios. It's just that grass type that really holds us back, which, I mean, what more can you do? I mean, just have something other than Raichu to go up against the grass types, and you've basically got a great little match there, because Raichu is going to be able to handle a ton of different things except for the grass types. So that is actually going to be it for today, guys. Thanks so much for hanging out. Thanks so much for watching. Always remember that if you do have a deep dive, to please comment it down below, because as I said, we are running very close to the Mirror Cup, which means we're running out of time to get through some of these Pokemon. I will show you this is what we do have coming up next. Definitely drop some comments below if you want to have these Pokemon talked about before the Mirror Cup happens tomorrow. Hopefully, I think they were a day late on the Jungle Cup announcement, so I ended up eating my words that time. But either way, thank you guys so much for hanging out. Thanks so much for watching. I'll go ahead and roll the ending clip to the video. Thank you guys so much for watching. Always remember that if you like to like videos, you could do that, but if you don't, you could be that guy. Otherwise, let me know what you have to say down in the comments below about the video. I do highly appreciate you guys watching. If you guys want to support me in any way, there are several links down in the description for Patreon, joining the community here on YouTube, or even just directly PayPal if that's your thing. I greatly appreciate everyone's name that's on screen, as you guys have showed some sort of support outside of just viewing the videos, and I thank you guys. You don't understand from the bottom of my heart. So until our next video, guys, I will catch you then.